Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I found somebody that's a very interesting individual. And the cool part is that he's been around the world 100 times. So it's like when I got that information, I'm like, if somebody's been around the world 100 times, there is something there to unpack. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Ron Price. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Dave, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you're founder and CEO of Price Associates. So tell us, what is Price Associates and what's going on over there?
Well, first, Dave, I had a wonderful career in a number of different organizations. My last one was an international business that I ran from 1989 to 2000, and I retired from that. But of course, I knew I wasn't really retired.
Sure.
I thought now it's time for me to do the thing that I'm really passionate about doing. And that became Price Associates. I really fell in love with the idea of helping people discover and then pursue their greatest potential. And
Wow.
I just found so much joy in helping them do that. Sometimes it's individuals, sometimes it's with teams, sometimes it's with organizations. But we started that in 2004. And as a consequence of that, it's probably been one of the most satisfying career or jobs in my entire career.
Sure.
I just love seeing people come into their own and seeing what their potential is and recognizing that the only limits we ever have are the ones that we create ourselves.
Wow. Well, and I want to ask you that because, I think about potential, and that word is a really great word. But I also think that there's and I wrote down like real potential versus fake potential. I mean, there's real potential that we don't really even know that we have, kind of like what you said. How do how do you help somebody listening, Ron, that might be struggling with that concept right there of how do I understand my full potential?
So we all have potential beyond our ability to understand, but it's all different.
Okay.
It's not the same for any of the two of us. So part of the journey is to figure out where your potential lies and how you develop that. You think of somebody like Tiger Woods with his dad, Earl Woods, early on. His dad saw potential, but he had to pursue it. He had to chase it. And it had to be combined with passion. It
Okay.
had to be combined with something that Tiger really loved doing. And of course, now we know the story, we know the result. The potential is the beginning point, but to turn it into performance, you have to know who you are and you have to develop skills and you need to master those skills and you have to have this passion to be the very best version of yourself. And within that context, I think we really do have unlimited potential, but not the same potential.
And I think that's probably the key, is not the same potential, right? Because as much as, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Ron. So as much as I want to think I'm going to be as good as Tiger Woods, and as much as I think I have that potential, is there a human limit to that? I mean, is that what you're talking about with that caveat there?
Yeah, so the way I like to think about it, Dave, is that it's made up of three different parts of the journey. The first is discovering your natural talent.
Okay.
And I define natural talent as recurring patterns of thought or motion or emotion or behavior that can be applied in a productive way. So let me give you some examples of that.
Sure.
Some people have the natural talent to connect with other people. Other people have the natural talent to see problems the rest of us don't see.
Okay.
Some people have the natural talent to move things quickly and to make quick decisions and to pivot and to keep innovating. Other people have the natural talent to be more deliberate and more thoughtful. So this is recurring patterns of behavior. Recurring patterns of motivation are different things that interest us, that attract our attention. For some people, it's learning. For some people, it's trying out new things. For some people, it's doing something altruistic for others. But that's a second part of our talent, is where does our energy come from? Where does our fuel come from?
Okay.
And then the third part of our talent are recurring patterns of thinking. All of our brains work differently. Of course, we have a lot in common, but there are no two brains that are exactly the same. And they influence how we see the world. They influence how we see other people. It influences how we see practical things around us. It influences how we have vision or see the potential in the future. These are all natural tendencies that we're born with and we develop through life experiences. That's the first part of the journey. The second part of the journey is as we get to know ourselves in those areas, how we begin to apply that to develop skills. And I think of skills as the ability to perform, the ability to get something done.
Okay.
Now, I've got a little secret. When I was young, my mother, somebody told my mom that I had the hands of a piano player. And so she went and bought me piano lessons. Of course, it wasn't true. I didn't have the hands of a piano player, but I practiced and I won a couple competitions. And
Wow.
then when I was in the 7th grade on a Friday afternoon, my piano teacher called and fired me.
Uh-oh.
You know why?
What did you do, Ron?
I wouldn't practice.
Okay.
I didn't like practicing. I didn't enjoy practicing.
Sure.
Many years later, when I was going on this adventure of trying to understand talent, I went to a human engineering laboratory where they ran 22 different scientifically validated tests on me. And at the end of it, they said, Ron, you should consider becoming a professional musician. Well, I will never be a professional musician because I never took the talent and converted it into skill. And to
Gotcha.
convert talent into skill is where the real hard work takes place. And even though Tiger had talent, he still had to convert it into skill.
Gotcha.
So you can either try to create skill out of something just because it's something that you dream about,
Sure.
or you can build skill based on understanding your talent patterns. And now you have the potential to do something that's really amazing. So there's a third part to that journey. It's talent, it's skills. The third part we sometimes refer to as strengths, but I like to call it second nature talent. It's when you have taken talent, you've built skills on it, you've practiced it for so long that it has become second nature for you. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have to keep practicing, but you've reached a certain level. And the example I like to think of here is Steph Curry with the Golden State Warriors. You know, that guy still shoots 100 3-point shots every single day.
Wow. Yeah.
Now he's developed the skill.
Sure.
It's second nature for him, but he
Sure.
knows that if he doesn't keep practicing it, he begins to lose that second nature. So this is where performance comes from. It's understanding who you are, developing the best version of yourself, being very disciplined. And now you have no idea how far you're going to go, because it really boils down to that success is when preparation or luck, I'm sorry, is when preparation meets opportunity. So you keep preparing, the opportunities will come your way.
Sure. So I am looking at this natural talent, this first piece. So if somebody's listening right now and they're not really sure what their natural talent is, I mean, I start thinking about maybe what I like, what I enjoy, what I'm good at. I don't know if it's that simple or if it gets into more complex thoughts. So can you kind of help somebody along that's listening right now, that is like agreeing and appreciating what you're sharing, but they're struggling how to get out of the starting gate, so to speak, on that first piece?
Yeah, I think for me, and I don't know if this is going to be true for everybody, but for me, it began with what interested me.
Okay.
And what I seem to enjoy doing. And that led to other people endorsing it. That led to other people saying, you know, Ron, you actually are pretty good at that. And I needed that encouragement from other people because I didn't really know how far I could go. But then that inspired me to want to go deeper, to get to know myself more. And that led me to a discipline of 30 minutes of reading every day. It started back in 1978. And I'm reading books about how to become the best version of yourself, how to understand yourself better, how to be a better leader, anything that relates to how you continue to grow. And that feeds your subconscious, which
Sure.
eventually gives you more wisdom. And then where that led to me, as I mentioned, that I started studying it from a little bit more of a structural or a conceptual level. So I looked at a lot of different places that you could complete assessments, that you can complete tests that would help you understand and learn more about yourself. And that created a wonderful framework that has served me very well for many, many, many years now. But I continue to go deeper in that. I
Sure.
don't feel like I've still completely figured out who I am, Dave. This is part of the journey of life. It's part of the joy, is that you never get to the end of you.
Ron's still figuring out what he wants to do when he grows up, huh?
That's right. That's right.
Well, and so you and I are both, very involved in the assessment world, and we use a lot of DISC, the personality profiling, and so I'm curious if you utilize an assessment of any type that you can share with us that is really kind of that spot where, again, I might know what interests me. I mean, let's just say for the sake of the conversation, golf interests me, or, others encourage me to say, yeah, you should play more golf. I mean, there's still a long journey from it interests me to I can make a living at it and it becomes who I am and my passion. If I struggle past that spot, Ron, what kind of assessment would you suggest, helping somebody out with, in the world, there's so many. So I'm just curious if you've had any that you've seen successful there.
Yeah. So it's a great question, Dave. And I'll start by saying that there's two sides to that. The first is technical assessments that help you to understand. For instance, a technical assessment would be somebody to study your golf swing.
Sure.
That would be an example of that. The other side I refer to as human assessments. It's understanding your makeup as a person, your traits and things like that. And you and I are both associated with a company called TTI Success Insights.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually use 6 or 7 of their individual assessments for
Okay.
myself and to help other people develop a deeper understanding. So behavioral style or DISC is one of them.
Okay.
Another is what are the person's underlying motivators? What is it that drive them?
Okay.
A third one I look at is what are their thinking patterns? How do those influence the way they view life? A fourth one I look at is their leadership skills.
Okay.
And we can measure 25 different levels of experience and mastery of leadership skills. A fifth one I look at is their emotional intelligence. A sixth one that I take a look at is stress. Where is it coming from? And how is it impacting them? And because sometimes our success is about removing obstacles. It's not always about what we're going to do. It's about what we're going to quit doing or how we're going to manage things better.
Sure. Sure.
And then the seventh one that I will use, but I don't use it quite as often, is gaining a better understanding of how a person approaches selling. Because
Okay.
whether we know it or not, we're all selling all the time.
Right.
And it's about influencing people. It's about having a positive impact. So those are 7 different assessments that I use. But the 4 that I use the most often are the first 4: behavioral style, underlying motivators, thinking patterns, and leadership skills. Those are the ones that I use most often.
That's awesome. And I think that can be very intimidating to people, that aren't really familiar with the assessments that are out there. So, the 7 things that Ron just talked about are really are pretty simple when it comes to, I always envision, prior to getting involved with these, Ron, I always envision like having to get my brain hooked up to, all these waves and wires and all that. And like, you wouldn't let me go home once you found out what was in there, So, I mean, for the people listening, I mean, a DISC assessment's a simple 20 some question, I don't want to call it a test, it's an assessment, and you kind of just position your words on, what you're most like versus what you're least like. So, I mean, it's pretty simple in that respect, but it's crazy how much that actually, you are able to find out about yourself. And I think as you jump into that second one where you talked about know yourselves, I think this is where entrepreneurs, and I want to get your opinion on this, Ron, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that. They're going so fast, they're doing so many different things that they're really not interested in stopping and assessing themselves, and kind of, because that requires time and energy, and I got to make this month's payments and blah, blah, blah. So do you run into a lot of people that kind of give you a little pushback on knowing yourself? I mean, how do you maneuver those waters?
Yeah, in the early days of somebody's career, when they're trying to survive, especially if they're an entrepreneur, when you got to make payroll that weekend, or you have to make enough money to pay rent,
Right.
this is a pretty noisy thing. It's difficult to get beyond that. And I have a lot of empathy for people like that. But I discovered early in my career that if I kept behaving the way I was always behaving, I was going to keep getting the results I was always getting. So I told you in 1978, I made a commitment to spend 30 minutes a day reading. It actually was driven by stress because I had all these to-do lists that I wasn't getting done. And I felt like I was an imposter. And I said, I've got to somehow gain some degree of control over how I'm living my life and not always just be reacting to what's happening around me. So in
Mhm.
my case, I decided I was going to start work 30 minutes early every day. And for
Okay.
that first 30 minutes, I was going to resist every temptation to the urgent. It was going to be an investment in me because I knew if I invested in me long enough that I could gain more control over my schedule and I could get away from those pressures
Mhm.
so that I never think about paying the rent anymore. I never think about meeting payroll anymore
Sure.
because that's a part of my past because you don't have to live that way.
Sure. Well, and I think that, so I write down imposter and control and reacting. These are like, but these are hot topics, you know. I mean, we all probably struggle with at one point in time in our life being an imposter. You know, we are trying to make ourselves, you know, look more powerful than we might be. I don't remember what that fish is, but there's that fish that blows up and makes itself look way bigger than it is. You know, turkeys, you know, all the, there's nature, there's kind of some natural imposter built in probably to a lot of us.
Yeah.
But I think that the sooner that you're able to identify that, like you said, I think the more you're able to then work through it. Because if you live as an imposter your whole life, I mean, you came to a point where it was like, no more, I'm done. And it was probably a pretty, you know, religious event, so to speak, where it was like, oh my gosh, I got to do something different here. And I like that because we talk about that each week about trying to find some different ways to try something. If something's not working or you think something could work better, you know, these are great tips that Ron's sharing with us, you know, on your natural talent, on finding out what that is. And then, you know, being able to take and understand yourself and what skills that you have, you know, as you jump into the third one, then, you know, your second nature talents or your strengths. I mean, is this what came to my mind, Ron, was like strength finders, you know, where you look at something like that as an assessment to try and understand what you're good at. And I know DISC does that as well. So I'm just curious to find my strengths. Is where do you lead people when they ask that question?
I think it's when you've worked on a skill so long that it begins to flow and you don't have to think about it anymore.
Okay, gotcha.
And you can see, for instance, people who have invested a lot of years developing their public speaking skills. They get up and they seem so relaxed. It just flows.
Yep.
And they paid the price. They have done their homework, they've practiced so that they've gotten to a place where they're very comfortable. And sometimes it's described as being in the zone
Hmm.
where it's challenging, it's exciting, you're growing, but it's not stressful. It's almost as if time stands still for you. And
Yep.
every one of us, sometimes it's being a mother. That happens when you're holding a baby. Sometimes it's the person who goes out selling, who's developed that as a second nature talent. Sometimes it's the person who's a problem solver, who they just see things the rest of us don't see. But this is taking that talent, moving it through a skill so that it's actually become integrated into you so that it flows naturally from you. And I encourage people, most of the time, you're going to find that not through an assessment. You're going to find that through experience.
Okay.
You just keep working at the thing that you love, that you know you have talent for, get a little better, a little better, a little better. And Dave, it's one of the advantages of being old now.
Come on, you're not old. Come on.
I've reached the point where I know who I am and I know who I'm not.
Sure.
And I've gotten very comfortable with my weaknesses
Yeah.
because I know that that's not what defines me. What defines me is how do I use my strengths to serve others?
Sure. That's so awesome. And I wish that I had, you know, I wish 30 years ago that I would have been able to consume those words that you just said and actually make a modification in my life where I could accept my weaknesses. I mean, I run into people all the time. They're still covering them for them. They're still covering their weaknesses. They're still justifying. They're still protecting, you know. And my next book that I'm working on right now is about business blind spots. And it's like, sometimes we really have a blind spot. I totally get that we may not see it. And that's why we have mirrors, and that's why we have fellow people around us to help us through that. But there are people that refuse to listen to those sorts of things. So, you know, they probably aren't even listening to a podcast because they already know it all. You know, they've already done it all. So, but I think that, you know, for somebody that's listening, you know, you talk about how to develop new ways of thinking. So let's say somebody's on the track, they're just, you know, zoned in on doing what they've been doing. And now they're exposed to you now for the first time. And now they're thinking, wow, maybe there's something to this. How do we help them, or how do you help people develop a new way of thinking so that we can maybe do a little course correction here or there?
What a great question. And of course, the answer may not be the same in every instance.
Sure.
But one of the first things I want to go to is I want to understand their basic mindset.
Okay.
Are they trying to fix themselves? Are they what I would refer to as a desperational leader, trying to keep from getting caught? Or do they recognize that there's something that they can become? And so I want to have a conversation around spending 70 to 80% of our time focusing on what their talent is, how to develop that into strengths and into performance, and no more than 20 or 30% of our time and only focusing on one weakness at a time.
Hmm.
The reason I think this is important, Dave, is I think we've been brainwashed. As toddlers, we get a lot more no's than we get yeses. Now, we do get some yeses, and for good reason. Our parents are telling us, don't do that, because they're protecting us. But they're
Sure.
actually wiring our brain to focus on mistakes. Then we go to school and we turn in our homework, and our teacher turns back the homework with everything we did wrong marked in red.
Yep.
We're being brainwashed to focus on our weaknesses. And then we finally get out of school and we go to what's called the performance evaluation meeting. And even though our boss tells us what a great job we're doing, the thing we go home thinking about is that one area that we need to improve in.
Right.
So the first thing is mindset. If people can really shift and think about who they can become instead of who they don't want to, you know, instead of wanting to fix themselves,
Sure.
that's the beginning point. And that really gives a tremendous platform of positivity that everything else can grow from.
Sure. Well, and think about that. I mean, that's like fundamental mind shift, like you just said. That's a shift because, you know, I tell the story all the time about here in Wisconsin. We live out in the rural area, and it takes 5 or 10 minutes of me on my motorcycle, and I'm in the middle of farm field in the middle of nowhere, you know, and I'm enjoying my life. Life is good, and I'm going 55 miles an hour, and I look up ahead, and I'm coming into a small town. And there's a sign that says 25 miles an hour. And right behind that sign, there's always what? A cop.
A policeman.
Right? Yep. So he's sitting there, and never once, Ron, has he ever pulled me over and said, Dave, I just want to thank you for doing the speed limit. You know, they don't do that. So we as leaders are trained to catch people doing the wrong thing. And so I spend my life saying, hey, catch your team doing something right. You know, because that is such a fundamental shift. I love thinking about that mindset that you're talking about, where you're trying to develop new ways of thinking. And these are in small ways, you know, and that's where I think we're doing these really small course corrections. So I appreciate that, you know, piece right there. There was something really cool that you wrote that said, if you move people, you'll move the numbers. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are probably still struggling with, you know, the bottom line. If I treat my, you know, customers right, and I treat my interior team, my interior customer right, if I treat both of those right, it's going to cost me a ton of money. And therefore I can't do that. I have to take the hard line. I have to. What caused you to say that if you move people, If you move the people, you will move the numbers. Explain that concept for us if you could.
Well, first of all, it's so interesting that somebody would say, if I treat people this way, it's going to cost me a lot of money. You can treat people any way you want. It's not a financial equation.
Sure.
It's a choice that you make for how you interact with people. So
Right.
to take the time for people to feel that you understand them, that you're listening, that you know what they want. Really, all success in business is solving somebody else's problem. All great innovation is solving somebody else's problem. So the better you understand their problem, the more success you're going to have, and that's going to bring you financial results. And those problems can be your customers, those problems can be your employees.
Mm-hmm.
And in the long run, if you develop that kind of a mindset that all success comes out of knowing others and helping to solve their problems, you'll find more and more and more opportunities open up to you. And when they feel that coming from you, Dave, they're happy to pay you for
Yeah.
what you do. They're not wanting to bargain with you because it's a relationship, not a transaction.
Yep.
So the entrepreneur who is stuck in that I've just got to work harder and run harder and run harder,
Right.
they're missing the higher level of living. They're missing the higher level of success. And as you said earlier, that's not a habit that you can change like that. We have to look for little ways.
Right.
It can be as simple as saying good morning to your employees when you come in.
Right.
It can be as simple as asking a customer how their day is going, instead of always being focused on the transaction or the work to be done. And a lot of entrepreneurs eventually figure this out. A lot of entrepreneurs realize that their greatest joy and their greatest success comes from moving the people, touching the people, serving the people, and that the numbers then take care of themselves. You know, I've looked at financial statements ever since 1971.
Mm-hmm.
And every financial statement I've ever looked at is a post-mortem. It's after the fact.
Sure. Yep.
All
Yep.
it's describing is how well you performed in serving other people. And it's not, I'm not being Pollyannish or naive. You have to understand good financial management. You have to make good financial decisions. You have to control your costs reasonably. But in an extreme either direction, where you're overly frugal or you're overly generous, is going to get you into trouble. You have to learn how to balance it in the context of the current business challenges that you have. So I've had to make some really tough decisions sometimes in all the years I've been in
Sure.
business. There have been some downturns where I had to make some really hard decisions. But there are other times where I had to really make an investment, believing in the future and knowing that it wasn't, the return wasn't going to come to me at the end of this week or the end of this month. It was going to take some time.
Well, and I think so you would say control your costs. And I think that gets people, for the entrepreneurs listening, that's like, yes, thanks, Ron, preach it, right? They're like, go ahead and say that, because I think that there's a lot of black and white in business where it's either one way or the other. I can't find a way to control my costs and treat my customers and my team right. I see that a lot as it's an either or. And so I'm trying to explain to people, right now, 1 in 3 of your employees show up every day engaged in their job, according to Gallup. So it's our job as leaders to find ways to get those other 2 out of 3 engaged. And there's tons of ways you can do it and not spend any money. Now, you'll invest energy, you'll invest time, absolutely, but it doesn't necessarily hit that cost, the bottom line. So when you have somebody that has that black or white mentality of, I either am going to, give all my money away or I'm not giving any of it away, how do you help people find that middle ground in that situation, Ron?
I always think that people do things for their reasons, not for ours. So I always go back to, how do you perceive the current situation? If they think they have to be more frugal, why do you feel that way? What is it that's making you think? And how do you know that that's accurate? What data do you have to back that up? Do you have other business models that say the same thing or something different? Next question I ask is, well, what do you want the future to be? This is what you're perceiving that it is right now. We don't know if it's entirely accurate. What do you want it to be in the future? And is there enough of a gap between where it's at now and where you want it to be in the future that you're willing to do something different? Because you won't get a different result. You won't be able to close that gap between your perception and what you want unless you're willing to do something different. And if they say yes, then I say, okay, so let's explore. What could you do differently? What could you do that demonstrates more care for people, but doesn't take money out of your pocket? What could you do that reorients your mindset around solving other people's problems instead of asking them to solve yours?
Yeah.
And I want them to discover it, because when they discover it, they own it. If I just give them advice, I'm just another guru and they don't remember who I was
Sure.
next week. But I want them to discover it, because once they discover it, they tap into their own growth potential, their
Mhm.
own learning. And now there's no telling how far they can go once they understand that they can be the source of that wisdom and insight.
Wow. And that's so powerful right there for you listening. I mean, this is where you are at. These are the crossroads that we have in our lives and in our careers, where we get the decision to continue to move on in the way that we've been doing it, which again, no judgment, no criticism here. More power to you if you want to keep going that way. I always say, if you go that way, that's fine. You just really can't complain about it because, in this case, Ron's giving you an idea, that you can flush out, you can use it however you want. And again, for somebody that has traveled around the world as many times as he has implementing these types of things, if it didn't work, there wouldn't be 30 years of success behind him. And now, like he said, it might be different for you than for him. The concepts are the same, but the particulars, the specifics, the swing coach might be a little bit different, and we all know that. So I really appreciate what is here, and I think that there's a way that you, like Ron said, we can move the people and we can move the numbers, right? They're both happen. And I think that the people first, I love that book, People Over Profit, because it proved in research that if you treat your people right, profit will follow. And so that's what I think is so powerful, but it is a hard journey. We're not saying, oh man, all you got to do is say good morning to everybody and your life will never be the same. And we all want a magic bullet, right, Ron? It'd be awesome if you had one for us. But I want to ask you, as we land this plane today, what would your tip of the week be? I want to know Ron Price's tip of the week.
My tip of the week would be to spend the first half hour of every day investing in you.
Wow.
Somebody gave me that advice, and it has served me so well that I keep expanding it. On my best days, I invest 4 hours in
Oh
me
my gosh. Does that include golf or not?
No, it's not for golf. It's for something that's more important to me than golf. That is becoming who you can become.
Awesome. Wow, that's fantastic. So again, if you're listening and you're trying to find a takeaway from this, there's a bunch that we just learned, but there's a really simple one that you can start right away tomorrow. You can start right away today, is take 30 minutes for yourself. And I've heard plenty of people say, there's no way in the world, Ron, I can hear the brakes going on right now. There's no way in the world that I can do 30 minutes. Okay, well, maybe start with 10.
Yeah.
Start with 5, start with whatever you can to invest in yourself, because I feel terrible when I see people working, 14 hours a day, investing all this energy into a company, and the company has never said thank you. I've never seen somebody work 14 hours and walk home and go, I feel so good. I mean, they think about what they're missing out on. They think about, why am I doing this? So, takes 13 hours and 40 minutes if you have to and work, but take some time, to Ron's point, to invest in yourself. I think that's just fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So
yeah, and Dave, I will just comment that my executive editor for some other books, we decided to co-author a novel that really captured this idea. It's called Growing Influence. And it's about a woman who feels out of control and she runs into a retired CEO at a coffee shop, and they develop a friendship.
Okay.
And it really walks through how you can not only invest in yourself, but continue to grow yourself. So it's really the work of my heart for these later years, is to be able to give that as a gift to people.
Wow, that's fantastic. So if people want to learn more about you, if this has sparked some interest in somebody and they want to, I always say there's like high impact and low impact. So low impact is what website would be a great spot to go to?
They could go to price-associates.com.
Perfect. And on there, I saw some video. There's, access to your books. If they want to get a hold of you, if they want to connect with you because they were like, Ron, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to talk more. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
I think it's for them to reach out to you.
Oh my gosh. What am
The
I going to
truth,
do here?
Dave, the truth of the matter is that I'm moving into a different phase in my life.
Okay.
And we have a lot of digital products and a lot of print products right now, but
Sure.
I'm not doing client work anymore.
Oh my. Okay. You have associates though that do, correct?
They do. So if they go to price-associates.com, they can find out more about them.
That's awesome. Wow. That is so cool. Well, thank you so much, Ron, for investing in us this week. And, again, for you listening, if you don't walk away with something, I have to say, as I try to say regularly, that's on you. Ron shared 30 some years of experience. I mean, multi-million dollars worth of, experience, learning it himself, teaching it to other people. He speaks around the world. I mean, these are situations where we don't get every day. So I take extra precaution to make sure and write something down. I want to invest more time in the mornings for myself. So that's what I'm going to do. And I just encourage you listeners to do something with what you just heard, rather than jump into the next podcast, rather than just turn it off, get off the elliptical and go watch TV or whatever you do. Just take some stock in what was just said and find one or two things that you are able to do different, that you are able to discover about yourself. I mean, how cool would it be to be able to, get to a point where there's a second nature strength where it just comes naturally to you? That is so cool. So thank you so much, Ron, for sharing that. And congratulations on optimizing strategy for results. That's your next book that's due out here shortly. So excited to see that. And again, probably see you in Phoenix coming up here shortly. And thank you again for all that you've shared today, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Dave. It's been a pleasure to be with you.